Why can't I hear it? Oh. Okay, you get the picture. Good everything. Good everything. That's Dubai.
Good.
I actually read a story this week about them having a year's worth of rain in one day. A year's worth of rain in one day. And I was like, okay, Mother Nature. And then I'm like, okay, Mother Nature, because Dubai, them the people that built a beach in the shape of a palm tree,
Yes.
brought in all of this sand and created,
Yes.
some land masses where there wasn't any. And then there's deserts and the camels. There's more images of the poor camels are like, what is happening? I got these humps for the water that
Right.
doesn't happen. Now it's a year's worth of water for, so they see the clouds, Dr. Carr, because they're such brilliant scientists.
Wow.
They see the clouds so that they can control the weather.
And with the objective of
Having rain when you need it and, being able to manipulate, the elements. Okay. Mother Nature's like, oh, this is what we doing? Okay. I'm gonna show you. Airplanes floating. People, there's one where the cars are literally on boats because they
the cars on what?
boats, like they put the cars on like the flotation devices because so you got like the G-Wagon
Yeah.
floating by.
Oh.
Oh my God. I was like,
They're not gonna stop.
I don't know. When are we gonna stop? Because it's all of us, with our half plastic bodies from the plastics and
Yeah, exactly. I ingested all the plastic now in our brains. So I guess we as a species, an invasive species is that will be stopped at some point. Question is, are we going as a species to survive? So within that large framework of species, how do we stop? Because clearly we didn't do that. That
no.
was the ruling class and their international finance capital and all their objectives trying to create artificial spaces to maximize profit. Love the language of capitalism, diversifying, diversifying the environment, for example. This is a desert. No, we're going to diversify the environment, diversifying natural resources. We're going to move from oil to information technology and create tourism as a destination. All those places, UAE, Dubai, those places. We're even going to diversify citizenship. There was an article last week. One of the places I was reading is talking about how the ultra rich are now collecting passports, 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. They're calling it diversifying citizenship so that they can move easily as those of us who don't have the resources begin to eat them. So they're going to move, when you can't eat the rich in the United States. If I'm in, Italy or Germany or Israel or Germany or Italy or England or any of those other places, perhaps even some of the places where our ancestors came from. But anyway, diversity. So nature has something to say when you push. Huh? They say when you push.
I wanted to share one more because this I'm probably gonna play it. I'm off next week. I'm gonna give people a chance to sit in my seat and see what they can do.
Okay.
Yeah. Plus it's my birthday week. It's yours too. So I was
funny because it always happens at the end of the semester. I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
So that's right. It is, isn't it?
So, being inundated, which is a good thing. People like you and they like me a little bit,
They like us both a little bit.
Yeah, a little
So
bit.
what else?
So I want to share this. Hold on, let me see if I
let's do
call
this.
it up. Okay, can you share? Can you see? Okay.
Not, yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to play this. This is, and it's profound because I think it ties into what we're talking about.
Oh yeah, okay,
All right.
absolutely.
A little story as somebody who is from the country. Um, if you ever just spent time sitting on the porch with your family, you might notice something that happens. Like the conversation will die down, and the oldest person on the porch, they're just gonna get up and go inside. They don't say a word. They don't say bye. They just get up and go inside. And then a few minutes later, you'll hear the person who's maybe middle aged, and they're like, "My knee is hurting. I think it's gonna rain." And then you'll have like the young people on the porch, and they'll be like, "Your knee doesn't have anything to do with the rain. Like, you're so crazy." And there might be a little bit of back and forth. And during that back and forth, it actually starts raining. And what you don't know about that story is that all of those people are the same person at different levels of understanding. That old person who got up and just went inside, it's because they could smell the rain in the atmosphere. And so they just chose to go ahead and go inside. And I think what you learn as you get older is that when you know things that are coming and you feel them in your spirit, you just move. Because when you get caught up arguing with people about it, you get caught in the rain. Okay? You don't have to wait for the rain, you can just go. I'm going to tell a little
Okay.
story
All right.
as somebody
So
who is
let me stop it there. All right. Let me stop it. Okay. So I thought about that. And this young lady, I think her name is Ashley. I thought that was profound because we're living in a world where some of us know what's about to come because we can smell it. I'm still at the arguing with people telling them my knees hurt phase. I realized I was that person. I'm gonna tell you this is why it's about to rain. My knees. Yeah.
So when she says that these are the same people, of course, talking about age and experience, do you have to reach elderhood to develop your capacity to smell?
No. No, I don't
So
think I
the person who is in the middle stage who says their knee hurts could have developed the capacity to smell rain as a child if they had been in an environment where that natural ability was cultivated. And the young person, the miseducated person, of course, who dismisses it because they've been trained out of their natural capacity, at least to that point, just rejects it. So then how do we get young people to smell the rain?
to constantly be in community. I went
Yeah.
every summer to spend time with my grandmother, and it was just us. And my aunt B would be there from time to time.
Mm.
She was wild and a lot of fun. But but my grandmother was so wise and so amazing. I was just telling somebody this the other day. It was the first time, parents have a different relationship with children, because it's still, especially young parents, working things out, figuring it out. And in many ways, children are a burden, diapers, crying, all of the things. And there's, a little seed of resentment, especially if you're young and the child has interrupted your life. But grandparents have a different, most grandparents. I don't know how grandparents are today because nobody wants to grow old and wise. But my grandmother took me everywhere. I played Pacino with she and her older friends. She had me 7, 8 years old with the Pacino at the Pacino table. We
Yeah.
would play bingo. She took me everywhere. We burned garbage. She taught me how to cook. Just
Garbage. Woo, you just brought that
garbage in the
back.
backyard. Yeah. Yeah, Augusta, Georgia. She lived on this dirt clay road. It was a dead end street, and I would go
Mm.
visit my cousins. And I just went when it rained really bad because sometimes, back then the windshield wipers, maybe the windshield wipers weren't that good, but we literally had to pull over until the rain stopped because we couldn't see. And I just remember those moments at night, lightning, and got to be away from the phone, and we would just sit and talk. Like she would just talk with me, and there was the first time I felt like complete unconditional love. Like as a child, you're gonna be told, do this, do that, don't do this, you're wrong. Like there's this little bit of a transactional relationship between parent and child because you got to clean your room, you got to do there's very little engagement. At least that was my experience. About, my grandmother though, unconditional, just pure pouring into. And it gave me confidence outside of like, being raised in my home, that there was somebody on this earth, no matter what I did, had my back. And I think we all need that. We all need to find that. And as a child, it helps you develop because there's a fearlessness in that if you make mistakes, there's no penalty for it, just lessons. Just somebody gonna rub your back, tell you it's okay. You're not gonna get apoplectic because you're gonna be in trouble. You know what I'm saying? So I always had that, much to my mom's chagrin, actually, because she said my grandmother ruined me. Because when I came back that first summer, it was like you couldn't tell me anything. My grandmother let me do everything. And it was liberating. And I still remember it, right? So spending time with elders, like real elders, not elders trying to be youngers, I think is so important. And
or youngers trying to be elders.
that too. So I don't know. I think that's important, but I feel like we've lost that bond, that multi-generational bond. Even heard the explaining being on the porch. When do we have those moments with a great grandma, on a porch together, rain's about to come? Even that scenario might be foreign to some people listening.
It is. And it is, and it isn't. And it is, meaning that it is because there are many people who have never sat on a porch. It isn't in the sense that this is a porch. And you convene a porch every day of the week but Sunday. And this is a place where we convene. And it isn't, again, I think, because we have to rebuild our capacity to sit and be collectively. And we build that on an existing foundation, not on one that has gone away. We're still here. And, all this entire body span of work that we are undertaking that connects to all of the work before, from the beginning of humanity to now, is really in many ways a process of rediscovery. The porch is there. The porch, when we didn't have porches, we got stoops. When we didn't have stoops, we go to the corner. When we didn't do the corner, we would just gather up in a circle somewhere there, steady under the surveillance, as they repassed the surveillance thing last night in the U.S. Congress, of this social structure framework that understands the power of Black convening is the power to remake the society. We never stopped gathering. The porch becomes a metaphor. But what you just showed us, this young person is aware of that, and in trying to explain it, TikTok, which I see now, Apple is banning WhatsApp and another Threads, I think it is, in China. China's told them you got to get out. They're gearing up, I guess. If you're going to snatch TikTok, we're going to make you. But, they're points of entry. They are not. And I hope everybody understands why. But if not, we'll say it again and again. Stolen Focus. We can start with that book. They are not the end point. But that little video is a nice point of entry now to sit quietly and recover that, rather than say, okay, I got it, check. No, you just negated everything that young lady just said. The key, it's funny, I think about it, because this week, or next week's the last week of class, and so students are doing final papers. Graduating seniors have turned theirs in first. And in my hip hop class, they have a research assignment involving the history makers, and we were saying, now, what do these elders know about subsequent generations in hip hop? So we're going around the topic to get to the topic, as John Henry Clark said. I said, well, we can start. Let's put in a name of someone that might have been talked about by someone in the previous generation. Let's put in Kendrick Lamar. And up pops Diane Reeves. And Diane Reeves said, I'm interested in Kendrick Lamar. I found what he's doing very interesting. And so we started talking about that. I said, but y'all know Diane Reeves. No recognition. No recognition. I said, but you don't know the name. So I said, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about that. I was a child, about 3 or 4. All day I'd ask questions, at night I ask more. And they were like, oh yeah, we know that. I mean, and so listening to you talk about you and your grandmother, that's Van Reeves talking about her grandmother. And that's why that song is so beloved. Young people who got a chance to be with old people, and whatever question you ask, as Dan Reeves says, she never, ever turned me away. 4 generations of love on her face. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is the, so you can't be young and be an elder. No matter how much you get on television or write in the newspaper column or what. No, an elder has something that you don't have. The Egyptians, finally going back to the ancient Egyptian, they have a phrase that says, my heart of different ages. The reason the elder is an elder is because the 6-year-old is still in her. You know what I'm saying? And so as we fill in the blanks, when we get to our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond, we say to a 6-year-old, I was 6, but you ain't never been 90. So I know the 6-year-old in me and the 6-year and you're going to connect, and I'm going to help you because I'm going to add some other stuff that are only going to unlock with time release when you get to be 50, when you get to be 60. You know what I'm saying? But I'm going to put it right here with you because I was 6 and you were never 6. Egyptians figured that out millennia ago.
So what do you smell, Dr. Carr?
Oh, well, I was going to ask you that question first. The metaphor is there, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, is that too hard, isn't it? What do you smell, Professor Hunter?
I was telling you how unsettled I feel, because much like people seeding seeding the clouds, it doesn't take all day to say that probably is not going to work out the way you think it is, right? And to live in a world where you just see all of these things happening that are going to end poorly. And you can shout it from the mountaintops and people just aren't listening.
No question.
So that's kind of, my concern. And it's not even, fear mongering, because that's what you'll be accused of, or being an op. It's like, no, students of history, people who've lived long enough, have seen some things, have witnessed things that have happened in previous generation. It doesn't take all day it's math, right? So why don't you see it? And to have to yell and scream, this is why I said I'm the one that's telling you my knees hurt, because I still want people to get out of the rain. Now, the rain being the metaphor for something not good. When I say rain, I mean what Dubai is having. Years worth of rain in one day. Never good. And I guess there's a level of frustration because people just aren't listening collectively, and so it's like, my mom used to say, a hard head makes a soft behind. It's gonna be a lot of soft booties out there.
Soft booties.
Soft booties.
Soft and softened and softening. with the harsh agents that are washing those booties soft. Yeah. So when you smell the rain, it's interesting you say that. Our friend, brother, fellow Nubian, social justice warrior, news came as a shock to many that our brother Frederick Douglass Haynes gave up the CEO and leadership of Operation Rainbow Push, and this week. And if you can smell the rain, that you should prepare. Should you go in the house? Should you sit there till your knees start hurting, or should you argue and say? So I'm just saying, it's interesting because, and I don't want to go too far. We love our brother and embrace him, and as we embrace all our warriors. But this question of intergenerational, something that Africans understood very clearly and prepared for, in part, and it's very Kikongo, what you and your grandmother did, and countless others did. You put the youngest with the oldest. That's very much when you read the work of Bunseki Fukuyao, when he writes even little booklets like Hold That Up, Which Holds You Up, or Simbi, The Congo Art of Babysitting, or his book on the cosmogram.
Wow.
It says, you put the elders with the children because the elders are getting ready to go into the ancestral realm, and the children just got back from the ancestral realm. So they have a language that they share that you can't share. Once you age out of that language, if you didn't develop your capacity to listen. So I think about that in the terms of protocols. I mean, there's nothing in terms of Africana governance formations in certainly the diaspora, and think about the United States in particular, that is more protocol driven, to borrow from Angie Porter's work in a way, in terms of Africana legal studies, protocol. It's more protocol driven than the church. So I'm sure our brother Freddie Haynes knew when he was coming into Operation Push and that this isn't just an organization, this is a protocol laden place. And how do you then take a baton, take a lap from an elder around which the whole thing organizes? And we can only speculate at this point. I imagine that much more will come out as the weeks and months and years unfold. But there's a lesson in there. And, I think part because that's his friend, part because, he knows a lot of these people, like, a lot of them. But I don't know if you saw Roland Martin the other night. Roland went in. He said, this is a problem because Reverend Jackson, you got to stop. You got to get him like, see, this is a governance conversation. Now, I don't know what Jesse Jackson did or didn't do, Freddie Haynes did or didn't do, but it's very clear. I think about Reverend Wright, Jeremiah Wright, who there's nobody who's more versed in the protocols of the Black church in the context of Africana, Jeremiah Wright. How do we consult with our elders and then take what Mariba Kelsey would call the warrior class? Because the warrior class isn't the elder class. The elder class have aged out of the warrior class. We're in the warrior class now. In other words, we got the fists, we got the backs, we got the movement. The elders are supposed to be on the porch. We consult with them because they have at one time been warriors. And then we train the next generation. But our pipe, they talk about cradle to prison pipeline, school to prison pipeline. Okay, all that stuff is very nice. Governance, social structure conversations, that's fine. But when we're talking about who we are to each other, how do we develop our capacity to smell the rain? We model what rain smelling looks like. And if you can smell the rain, you might be able, you should articulate. An elder's not going to say anything. Warrior class group might say something, my knee hurts. And I think that some of the things can be avoided in our governance formations, like with Push, Rainbow Push. Maybe they can be avoided. Other things, we are simply going to have to pay the bill at this because we reject rain smelling. We allow ourselves to be framed by who we are to other people, not who we are to each other. And so we dismiss our elders. We dismiss things.
Or elders fail to become elders.
And
it won't, I'm to your point, we both know a lot of people and we both know a lot of things about a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there becomes this kind of tightrope that you walk between maintaining, I feel like in many ways we uphold the myth and the lie by not talking about it.
That's right.
About the things we know, right? So is it our responsibility to tell the truth and then how we do it also, I had a conversation on Foolishness Friday about somebody that I know pretty well, who I'm not very pleased with what kind of commentary is going out. And I understand, and I understand in their minds, they have talked themselves into believing that they are doing something righteous.
And that L that they get ready to take is beyond their capacity to comprehend. Why, Professor Hunter? Why?
I get this text, how do you let somebody? I'm like, yo.
It's bemusing though.
This is my point. I don't know what to do. How do we get here? What the hell is happening? What makes you think that this was okay? I don't.
What did you just dispatch with us? What the Egyptians would call Sabaite teachings? What did you just dispatch to us in a Sabaite about hard heads and soft behinds?
I'm like,
a behind that's so soft, it might not be able to fit back into pants. It's like your behind now just floats around. It's just, do you really want to take this L?
You need a skirt.
No. Hey, look, our brother Eddie Glaude still paying the bill for 2016. He out here right
though. But so as you say that, he's still on television, he's still getting the book deals, he's still getting coin, so like people can equate that with winning. Who? Do you know what I'm saying? People, I don't know. Dr. Carr, the people.
I would agree. Sure, it's material comfort. It's a form of prestige in social structure. They know me. They know my name. I am.
I get invited to speak.
Yeah, I'm tolerated because the Kabuki theater of race on Morning Joe is. If you watch it at all, you should only watch it for entertainment purposes. Because anytime a Black person is on Morning Joe, they are summarily dismissed. If you can read anything in terms of the rhythms of speech and the rhythms of conversation and even body language, you know that these Negroes here are, these are ratings made choices, or just, curiosities, or, like when the Europeans would paint those pictures in not medieval England, Renaissance England, and you see these white women laying around naked on couches, and then in the lower left-hand corner, you see a little black child. Yeah, that's who that is. This is a set off. Anyway, I said I like to say that, sure, there's a bank account, there's a moment of prestige, there are a few little trinkets and awards, but in the governance formation, there is an invisibility that I think is quite painful to a lot of our comrades and friends, people we know and people we don't. And it comes out at moments when the lights are turned off in the social structure spaces. Then there's frustration. Then there's anger. And it's like, but you've been in the pet store a long time. And now you came out in the street, and the dogs and cats that were never in the pet store is like, what's up? And you like, oh, I was in the pet store. No, you ain't got no claws. They done took out your reproductive system. Like, so now you walking around out here because they put you at the pet store, and it creates an angst. I feel sorry, really, for a lot of, certainly, I like you say, like a lot of your friends. I kind of feel sorry for them in a way, because you've sacrificed what you might think is your obligation. You might think you were filling your obligation. You've sacrificed it because you've allowed this system that we live in, the social structure we're currently in, to define who you are. You might not think that you have, but you absolutely have. Nobody listens to people. I mean, nobody in the governance format, except people trying to get over there. The rest of us don't,
I thought what you're saying is true. But again, I've lived long enough and have been on all sides of this equation watch people emerge. And I'm saying, so all they need to do is cut their hair back and put on a suit, and you accept them now. And now they get to be, get showered with millions of dollars and get television shows and platforms. But what about all of this other stuff? And that was when, I kind of had a revelation that maybe that's the playing in our face that we don't acknowledge, that they will handpick the very people that are undermining any kind of success, and then shower them with relevancy. And then we stupidly buy into it because we show up to their events or we show up to their talk shows. We can't wait to be in community with them and take pictures with them and all of the things that they do. So it's a circle jerk that we get them. We're the ones I shouldn't use that analogy, but do you know what I'm saying, Dr. Carr? In many ways, and I was sitting there like, don't they see? And then it's like, so how did they get? They got a TV show? Like, what are we doing here? Did we just agree that this person's problematic? Didn't we all agree? Now all of a sudden, this person's not problematic?
Well, there's no consensus. There's no agreement. I mean, when it comes to race, of course, there's an agreement. Aaron Rodgers, who is a magnificent example and avatar for all types of white nationalism and foolishness, remains employed, as people have been joking all week, and as Colin Kaepernick, of course, is not. So you have that. And when it comes to investment in capital, the $1 billion Japanese rental for the Los Angeles Dodgers, whose interpreter stole all this money and gambled. Okay. They can't touch him. They shut that down quickly. Meanwhile, Pete Rose goes on to meet his ancestors, having bet on baseball, never against his team, but always on his own team to win, because those were the rules. And of course, the conversation is being held, as everybody's joking on, by all these betting subsidized sports platforms. But I'm saying I like to say that we are in a space where it's difficult to smell the rain, but we can still smell it. And those spaces that were prominent even 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the lifespan of the average college student, our college students who don't remember a world without now TikTok, who don't remember a world, well, they maybe remember a world without TikTok. They don't remember one without YouTube, who don't remember a world without Google, which is basically their lifespan. And not even, quite frankly, those who were born in the early arts, they predate even that. But now with the explosion, everybody with an uplink, everybody with a stable internet connection is talking, and it becomes a question of how do we want to influence when people get a platform. But our angel investors here,
Yeah.
we are our
Yeah.
angels.
Yes.
You
No.
saw what happened. Did you see that the film company that shut down this week? They did An Inconvenient Truth. They won like 21 Academy Awards. It'll come to me in a minute. But the value proposition changes. Oh, I can't think of it.
Hold on. Let me look it up real quick.
Somebody will put it in the a couple people said it's their birthday. So participant studios.
Thank you.
Participant studios. They had an angel investor. It was in Financial Times, I think, the other day. The guy's a billionaire. He decided, okay, we're still losing money. So he told the 100 employees or so of participants that have all of these award-winning. Now, of course, they're also the studio behind the Green Book and The Help. So, whatever. But the point is that, at the same time that the Obamas have gotten deeply into the middle of the king-size bed with Netflix to develop their own platforms. We see Curtis Jackson has opened up his studio. Everybody wants a platform. Everybody has a platform. Tyler Perry, after having been shown what Microsoft was working on with AI, says, okay, I'm not going to invest these millions of dollars in studio because I can make this at my house. Yeah, but if everybody's talking at the same time, even with the platforms picking winners and losers, including the algorithms on the YouTube side of our porch, regular porch, which is why, people hit that like button, as you tell people, because of, driving that algorithm, or for that matter, on X, which is why Nubia was developed. So we don't need X anymore to have that conversation, even as we still engage in X for the people who are not yet or won't be in Nubia. Even with that curation, enough of the capacity to speak overflows the capacity to regulate speech so that people don't tune. Do you think,
So,
yeah,
I'm gonna be really transparent.
Yeah,
I always am. I don't speak a lot in this space because I don't feel worthy. People need to hear from you. But as you're talking, I remember being at the Daily News and I got invited everywhere. Right. So I thought I was important. This is why I think I have a perspective that most don't, because I have been that magical Negro in the room, Pulitzer, Polk Award, I was able. And so when I quit, I didn't get invited anywhere anymore. And I realized for that decade or so that it was not Karen Hunter, it was Karen Hunter, the New York Daily News, that got entree into these places. Even if Karen Hunter by herself was way more insightful and had more to offer and had all of the things, she wasn't getting invited anymore. So I said, if I ever come back into these spaces, I'm never building on the space. It's never going to be about the space. When I have my radio show, I'm on Radio Row, I'm at the conventions, I'm all of these places, I got my badge, but it was the radio, wasn't me. So even in publishing, nobody buys a book for the publisher on the spine. You buy the book for the content, right? Or the person on the cover. So for me, the work has always been root building, deep diving, foundation pouring. And, as you're talking, even I'm confronted because I'm in a space that I don't own on the radio. It's not mine, which in many ways is why there's a Nubia and a narrative, because we always need a place that is not controlled, because here's what's happening. I'm hearing Van Jones. I'm hearing this again. And I'm like, again, y'all still, okay, this ain't my space. I don't own it. Y'all going to do what you want. But how do I coexist in a space that is possibly putting an open enemy to our progress in a place? And I'm not going to be quiet about it. See, because they almost buy your silence, right? Because you want the platform so badly.
Yeah.
That you're going to.
There you go.
See what I'm saying? So you're not just going to, but I also am smart enough, because I smell the rain. And sometimes I'm going to tell you my knee hurts, to know that if I'm not there, people are going to keep listening. I'm not so foolish, Dr. Carr, to think that if I'm not there, people are going to leave. You know what I mean? Maybe a handful of people, but we haven't demonstrated, and I've said this before, the fortitude to even have maybe a boycott of any one company effectively today. Montgomery could never happen today. We're so busy fighting over who's black. I don't even know if that's possible, right? So some people may miss me in that space, but you'll continue, you'll carry on, you'll make the adjustment, because isn't that what we did for 400 years?
That's
When our family was sold, when we were raped and beaten, we made the adjustment.
absolutely.
I'm saying that out my mouth. So I feel like we are people that adjust to uncomfortable situations, and we keep on moving on. But I don't have in your estimation, like I don't feel like there'll be such an uproar. So I was like, okay, so if that happens, I have to make a decision, even though I know it'll hurt me and maybe some other people who are attached to me.
Right.
See what I'm saying? So it's not just me now, because I built out this ecosystem. I don't know.
If it's not just you, then that does raise the question. That's the question. What is your obligation if it's not just you? And that really does allow us to think about the question of debt, the question of obligation, where we invest. Creating a space that isn't serious, that isn't Hunter College, that isn't Howard University, that isn't a space that is social structure facing and anchored, regardless of the demographics of the space. Because in that regard, a historically black college is the same as a historically white college. It's just the demographics have changed. And of course, demographics make almost all the difference, except that the structure is the same. So I'm saying all that to say that when a space is created, albeit with a technology that isn't at least demographically black owned, everything from StreamYard to YouTube to the platform that Knarrative is on, but ultimately in a world where that too can happen, given the technology and the places where we have support and can nurture and develop support, whether it be the Caribbean, whether it be Africa, whether it be here in the United States or anywhere else, Europe, Latin America, where those platforms can emerge. All of that having been said, the conceptually independent space of narrative in Nubia, creating a space where these conversations can be centered. And in a moment, we'll talk about something that happened yesterday. Dissertation defense. Our student Angela Carter finished her dissertation yesterday. But one of the conversations that emerged, she did her work on Motown and Philadelphia International Records and some other things connected. But one of the questions that emerged as her committee was sussing out how she approached her work was, when they say Motown crossed over, was it crossover in the sense of, and she used the Africana Studies framework, which I think is she and Stephanie Tisdale, the next generation, they taking that thing, applying it now, developing theory, applying, testing these concepts. She said, and we asked her, did they cross over? Is that a social structure interpretation, or did the engendering of how they created meaning, cultural meaning making in their music? And she spent a lot of time on the musicians of Motown, the jazz musicians, so to speak, who came in and put that floor under. Was it that they really Africanized? And what happened was people came to them. Did they change their structure of their music? And she said, no, they didn't change their structure. Philadelphia International is much more political, but Motown was no less engendered with the drums, with the music, and I'm saying all that as a backdrop to say this independent space, and we see the influence of it seeping into those social structure facing platforms as people's language begins to reflect the conversations that are being told here. And those of you who are in here who then go in those spaces, go with God, because this is the maroon space. This is how maroonage works. You in the maroon space, then you go on the job and say or do something that came out of the independent. The independent space changes those spaces too, and that ain't even our goal. Why you think?
This is how I look at it, right? How many people are there? They say there's like 47 million Black people in America. We're global because the spaces reach beyond the borders of the United States of America.
Right.
Right now, there's 1,000 people on the YouTube side. There's a couple of thousand on Nubia. We don't even have, like, I would imagine if people wanted that. And again, we're dealing with appetites that have been cultivated over 400 years.
Mhm.
So if your appetite is to, like, for example, a Club Shay Shay type interview with a Cat Williams, where you're going to get millions of people that will show up for that, even though after it's over, yeah, we got some clapbacks, and where's the nourishment, right? People don't crave nourishment, or else we would have a million people in Nubia. And I don't on purpose push, because there's a scripture about, those who hear my voice will come. My sheep who hear my voice will come, right? So I operate under no coercion, no marketing. If it's in your soul to crave this clean glass of water, you're going to come, you're going to drink it, you're going to share it with others. But there's no mass movement, and maybe that'll come when our eyes are closed, and I'm okay with that too. But it is a little disappointing, because what I've known over the years, and this is what I'm saying about having seen things, the shiny bauble always wins. So we don't do this work for the shiny bauble, and we can't depend on it. And it would be really, really great to see so many people say, I want to have this kind of community. I want, I mean, when you see a comment like, oh, these people compliment each other too much, you're like, where are we? Like, what the hell? Why are you even in that? You know what I'm saying?
Clean glass of water. You just
Yeah,
don't.
that's what I'm saying. So, like it's hard to ignore it, but at the same time, you're sitting here, is always the criticism, never like, what am I actually, can I get one kernel of knowledge from here, one piece of information that nourishes me and that I can build on? And if that's the case, then take that. Don't look for the fault, which I think we've been conditioned. That's our appetite as well. So I say that to say, even in these spaces that we built that are our own, and we talk about this off mic, the fight to get, and I'm in this for the long haul. This is a 10-year journey. You already know
I know.
we're year 4 in.
I know.
But, in that, it does become like, okay, I know what we need to get the library. I know what we need to get the thing. And I'm not going to keep going back and forth when you see somebody get $100 million for doing absolutely nothing in our community.
Well, for being obstruction.
Yes. So,
I mean,
but then people want that. So somebody gave them 100 million. They must be valuable. So let's pay them to come speak. Let's do this. It's like,
and that's fine. I mean, again, it is what it is. I mean, we can't. Well, we know that we wouldn't be here if we didn't know that we won't be dissuaded or distracted, and that we join those who have never been. I was thinking about Etta Fields Black's book, Combi, on Harriet Tubman, who has actually today's the 20th, right? Weed day for a lot of people. I'm sure they're going to talk about distractions. But
I forgot it's 420. It's Hitler's birthday. It's marijuana day. It's
come on. Combi. Let me see if I can get it. Combi is Harriet Tubman, the Combahee River Raid and Black Freedom during the Civil War. Very interesting. This sister right here, Etta Fields Black, the good sister, she's written a number of pieces. There she is here. This book, where she traces Harriet Tubman, this book is 740 pages long. And it covers, well, the heart of the book is the spring and summer of 1863. And in South Carolina, Port Royal, Beaufort, the terrain, the environs that we know well. Shout out, of course, to Mike Harriet and all the folks from South Carolina, Bernie Goldman and them. She writes about the liberation in Combahee in June 1863 of more than 700 Africans, formerly captives, so-called enslaved, and the destruction of 7 plantations along the Combahee River. War work that was led by, in a number of ways that she chronicles in this text. Our mentor, Harriet Ross Tubman. I thought about that because of what you're saying, and in the context of, we don't really know a date as such, but there are some scholars who would say that April the 20th is the date that Harriet Tubman started the Underground Railroad. We get obsessed with these starting and ending dates and this kind of thing. But I bring it up because Harriet Tubman, our mentor Ross, did not free 4 million captive human beings in the system of enslavement. What she did was throw a rock. What she did was do what she could. And in that work, it sent ripples throughout this oppressive system. It certainly elevated her profile. She was the most wanted human being in the United States of America if you're using the value proposition of money, because there was a bounty on her head. And remember, this type of work, Harriet Tubman was a criminal. And they just unveiled the Harriet Tubman Quarter, I think, down at the Mint. Was it this week? Yeah, because I got an email late the day of saying, oh, you're invited to come. And, you know, working for a living, as I do, I wish I had seen it. If I had seen it even 12 hours earlier, I would have made some arrangements to be there to bear witness. But I'm raising that because it's not even irony. Harriet Tubman was a criminal in the U.S. social structure. She wasn't just a criminal in the South, in Maryland, the Eastern Shore of Maryland, where she was operating primarily initially. She was a criminal nationally. There was the Fugitive Slave Act, friends, meaning that she's stealing property. So the irony that she would be on the currency of the United States of America, is that progress? Sure, you can certainly make the case that that's progress and a social structure rendering. But it's also a revelation that when systems that oppress people, that create hierarchies, and that's the modern world system we live in, and that rely on extreme inequities in resources, extreme inequities in opportunities, extreme inequities in how people's humanity is curated and regarded, what we might even call citizenship. The idea that her face or her name, image, her likeness would be on the very currency that was used as an enticement to capture her and or kill her, dead or alive, the jokes write themselves. And, you know, if you don't have any resources to eat, it doesn't matter where George Washington or Harriet Tubman faces on the money. But I raise her because, you know, this excellent book, Combi, is about how, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, you know, the William H. Johnson cover here. And of course, the William H. Johnson exhibit is right now down at the National Smithsonian American Art Museum. But the idea that numbers, and we all know this, the idea that critical masses of numbers can change the world is absolutely true. And it's also true that critical masses don't start with critical masses. They start with small groups. So, and I'm glad you raised our brother Shannon Sharp, of course, alum of Savannah State University. When you see him arguing with the soft white nationalist Skip Bayless on their show, and then leaves that show and then goes into the podcasting world, which he had pulled up and started doing simultaneously, and then that explodes. And now, of course, he is the go-to interviewer in the digital world for pretty much mess. And this isn't a critique of him. I mean, I think I enjoy moments of Shannon Sharp. And then I realized that, you know, at 59, soon to be 59 years of age, that the number of breaths I have in this body are fewer with each breath than I had the day before. And I have to decide how many of them I'm going to sit and listen to distractions. Understand that in itself is not new. The technology has shifted so that we see more of it. But ultimately, the choices we make can drive social change. We just have to be deliberate about them. And yeah, Flo says, thank you, Bob Carr. It's important to keep our eyes on what is possible with the number we have in the Nubia chat. And the name of the book is Combi, C-O-M-B-E-E.
Yeah. Hold that up again. Hold on one second.
Yes,
hold on.
It is called Combi, C-O-M-B-E-E. Etta Fields Black.
I just bought it while you were.
I mean, and it's pet because the beautiful thing is.
I just want to clarify. I am absolutely humbled and honored to be in community with everybody that is part of Nubia. I've said this from the beginning. We don't need everybody.
No.
Narrow is the road that leads to salvation. I'm simply making a point that people say they want a thing, but when they have an opportunity to have a thing, they act, watch a person's actions, which is why I am never leaning into the masses to depend on the masses for what we need, because the masses, I even had this conversation with Dr. Black on Monday, Harriet Tubman bringing her brothers out. Like you said, she didn't bring 4 million people out of enslavement. She went back to get a whole lot of people.
Yeah.
And he explained, one of the brothers went back because he didn't want to leave his child and his family. And he went, but some went back for comfort, the comfort and the surety of being fed and having a roof over your head, which, and this is part of that conversation, right? Because out in the wilderness, it's uncertain. Having that steady paycheck and loads of it is something that most people are not willing to walk away from. And that's my only point, and supporting something that is burgeoning doesn't take anything away from you either. But the amount of people, and I've said this before, who would sacrifice to boycott, to benefit the rest of us. We're arguing about voting. There are people that won't vote singularly because singularly they can't, when they don't understand that that's going to harm us collectively down the line. And
well, they don't see
my only point is we're in a period of time when the collective good, people aren't seeing. They don't see the rain. They don't smell the rain. So they don't know the possibilities. I'm not voting for me. I don't live in a place where my kids are going to the schools and I don't have to, but I pay for taxes, a lot of taxes for children that are part of my community, even if they're not my children, because that's important that we have an educated class of young people.
That's right.
But, that kind of energy is just, to me, as I look around by people's actions, what they put their attention in, where they spend their time and money, speaks to a whole larger thing. And it's sad at the same time, I don't lament it because I love this community that we've built. And if we didn't build it, they came. You know what I'm saying? They just came, and it's just
come and keep coming and sharing and building. That's exactly right. I mean, we talk about paying dues, and dues are an enforceable obligation, an enforceable debt. So when people pay dues to be in a collective, the expectation is that those resources will be used to support the collective and the work of the collective. And so when you are a dues payer, that means that you're part of a community that you have joined because it is of a benefit. It's a benefit not only to you as an individual, but to the members of the group. And we need resources, and that's what we do. Now, that's different than a tax. Can be different than a tax. A tax is compulsory. It's a compulsory contribution to an entity. It's usually a fixed rate, or it's proportional. It's paid at regular intervals. But we think about taxes, we usually think about, of course, state formations. And we just passed tax day here in the United States of America. We talk about paying dues, paying taxes, and even the language of payment, the language of rendering, payment, we're paying. The idea is that when you're paying dues, you are in a voluntary association that you've made a choice to join, and that the benefits of the being in that voluntary association emerge as you invest in it. So that metaphor of paying dues becomes something that is used when we start talking about intergenerational dialogue. A couple of people in Nubia brought up, even when we talked about push just for a moment in passing, the idea that elders sometimes, frequently, engender in the next generation, invest in the next generation, time, ultimately responsibility. This is what Mariba Kelsey's writing about in his book. So you say you want revolution. And when he also writes in another book about how you cultivate leadership in subsequent generations, it's investing time, it's investing responsibility. And we know that elders do that every day in families and community formations. And those who come through that invest their time in learning, invest their time in acquiring skill, investors all, and that metaphorically is a process of dues paying, which is why when we see someone or some entity or something emerge that didn't pay dues, the assumption is that there is a common understanding of what the formation that one should be paying dues to and investing in and being poured into is. So when we see all of these internet, social media, cyber talking heads, the dues that are being paid are not to formations that we created out of our governance formations. So when people express frustration, there are two kind of spaces. We think about this in a governance formation, who we are to each other, where people express frustration. One side is the assertion that this person or this entity has been elevated to create confusion, to engender a sense of expertise that isn't there, all this kind of thing. And that's a general conversation. Why is so and so? Why is it? Not realizing that it's irrelevant as long as we do what we need to do, because those entities, you see them discard these people in relation to the threat that places they don't regulate pose. The other formation in the governance structure where the debates counter is those who would say, who actually practice that craft, who are pouring and contributing into these spaces we control, and then see something emerge because of a social structure curation attempting to blunt that work in the governance formation. And they will say, well, this person didn't pay dues. Right, because you're a member of a craft. You're a member of a formation where you have an apprenticeship. I mean, of course, you make this point over and over again, Prof, when you talk about journalism. And not that journalism is dead, it's that the journalists of African descent who do their work in a particular way are part of a formation that the social structure has been trying to displace and disrupt for the better part of the last century. Before apartheid ended in the United States, when the Pittsburgh Courier was out and at its height, and the Amsterdam News and the Norfolk Journal and Guide and all the other places, the Afro-American in Baltimore and DC and the California Eagle and all those papers were doing what they were doing, LA Sentinel ultimately, and those places, you know, the Calling Post in Cleveland. I'm just thinking about the play Tri-State Defender. I'm just thinking about all those places that we get. The New York Age. I'm just thinking about different, all these, you know, Jackson Advocate. Anyway, these newspapers, the black press, which still exists, but before apartheid, you know, we were talking last week, and you mentioned George Schuyler and his book Black No More and some of his work, and you know, we mentioned this book, which I think is a great book. It's called Black Empire. I mean, there are many different editions. This is the latest one. I just got it because I wanted to read the introduction by Brooks Hefner, but it's a cheap little paperback. You can get many different editions. Probably the authoritative scholarly edition is Northwestern University Press. Robert Hill did the introduction, co-wrote the introduction to that one. But Black Empire, you know, this is a book where the protagonist, Dr. Henry Belsides, is a black scientific genius who, quote, masterminds a worldwide conspiracy to take back the African continent from imperial powers and punish Europe and America for white supremacy and their crimes against the planet's black population. It's like, if you like Black Panther, you're going to love Black Empire. Black Empire did not come to the public in social structure newspapers. It was not in the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune. It was serialized over the arc of 2 years in the Pittsburgh Courier, weekly. Imagine buying the black newspaper to read fiction. George Schuyler was writing as a reporter, scholar, a lot of things, but he was also a novelist. He was also a serial novelist, kind of a pulp writer of sorts. But I'm bringing up Black Empire in this context because we controlled that press. Once desegregation took place, there was some cherry picking. There were some pioneers who did their best to bring us into the newsroom. I think about our sister and elder, the great Dorothy Gilliam, one-time partner of Sam Gilliam, the artist, still here in the DC area. Her memoir, Trailblazer. I was looking at her book on Paul Robeson the other day. But there were people who invaded those newsrooms, you know, and in the wake of those invasions, the invasions of the Max Robinsons on television, the invasions of the Mal Goods and others in the generation before him, when Karen Hunter comes into the space, you inherit that sense of obligation and you have paid your dues to the Black formations. There's an enforceable obligation or debt that you owe, whether it be in formal formations like the NN, what is it, National Negro Publishers Association, whether it be Association of Black Journalists, whether it be, that form, those formal recognitions, or whether it be the informal recognitions, when the people in the area. Here you are operating in the tri-state area in Jersey and New York, and you ran in that area, and you think, I am in this non-Black space, but I know Bob Law. Yeah, I know these people. I listen to the radio. I'm on the radio sometimes, the Black radio station. I read damn news. I know who Wilbur Tatum is, and then his daughter takes over after him. I mean, and I'm in the room with these spaces, and I navigate, as you say, in all these worlds. I'm very clear. Well, when you have a social structure that is deeply invested in oppression, it's going to do its best to undermine those spaces. And what we end up with is a situation where many of the people who we might see in social structure formations, which can be frustrating when we lose momentarily the reminder and reminding ourselves that nobody Black is, we're engaged in that because we see it everywhere. And there are too many people who are distracted. But what we're doing is building in a way that is reconnecting those generations and ultimately will outlast all of that, because as Ice Cube said in his song, Be True to the Game, they'll have a new N-word next year. So, I mean, they'll just switch out put so-and-so in it. It's not a problem. But in that space, what happens is many people who are in those white-facing spaces, those social structure-facing spaces, when they find themselves in governance formations, when they encounter us, the first thing that comes out of their mouth, often unprompted, is an attempt to explain themselves. Well, I'm in there because I'm playing a game. I'm playing chess, not checkers. So what I'm really trying to do is get in there. And did you see me last week when I dropped? No, I didn't watch. Why? I was too busy doing work. But for the people who did watch, you should talk to them because they listen to you. And then when you drive it into a ditch or they hold you up and play your clip over and over again, you sitting there looking stupid. Then when you come out there and try to say something, yeah, we're going to do something. Then people say, yeah, but didn't you say something? It becomes a mess. But if we get pulled in that, then we got a problem. It's interesting. Prof and everyone this morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I left class last week, Wednesday. My final full person class. We got one more day next Wednesday to do some housekeeping things relative to the class. But we wrapped up the last major full conversation in the critical race theory class that I taught at Howard University School of Law this semester. And I left that conversation with some, absolutely brilliant and committed young people. Shaq Al-Hajjaj, Taylor Anderson, Kiera Booker, Jasmine Cobb, Taylor, Josh Duffy Cooper, Yalisha Ford. I want to name them because it's important. And I want to thank them publicly for the conversation that we've had since January, one that is going to deeply inform the critical race theory class that we're going to have in Nubia. Same books, same themes, and now a semester of conversation. Janelle Gervon from Atlanta areas, people are from Jamaica, Kayla Hill Jones, Sabre Hubbard. Just some brilliant young people. Samantha Jeffrey, Kendra Johnson. These are students whose intelligence, whose brilliance, whose commitment, whose skill development as young legal minds is all emptied into the service of our people. Natalie Mack, shout out to Morgan State, the national treasure. That was her alma mater. Natalie's the one to talk to the students who came up from Atlanta, the Karen Shropshire and her people. Shropshire brought to come. They toured the law school a couple of weeks ago. Sonia Mattis, Nick O'Connor, my man Nick, who's also a man of the cloth. It's a beautiful thing. Nick, you know how much I love and respect you. And all of y'all, Akira Reed, Cheyenne Robinson, Leighton Rodwell, Lexia Thomas out of Texas, constantly pushing the envelope every week. Haley Thornton, Reagan Tillery, Angel Wame, and Alyssa Whitaker. Every week I'm learning from these young people, and they're having these intense conversations. Most of them went to historically white schools. Few did HBCUs. But coming to a black law school, the first thing I asked them, the beginning of class in January, was, how does a critical race theory class look different at HBCU? This is our one moment in time to puzzle that out, because I am not a critical race theory devotee. By that meaning, I don't think critical race theory is going to change the United States of America. And I don't think, and the group of scholars called the crits don't think it either. But I was grateful, and I'm still grateful to the School of Law, because it's not the class I usually teach. I'm going back to that class in the fall. But I'm going to teach now critical race theory, and it's going to be in Nubia. And we're going to invite people into the conversation. That's why we got Angie Porter in them. That's why we have all these legal minds and folks who are connecting, educators. You know, it's important that we have this conversation. But I told them, I said, in a black space, this conversation should be completely different. And it was completely different. But, you know, as I left, I was unsettled as usual, because now we're nearing the end of the academic semester, and we've jailbroken that, of course, because our learning now is consistent. We don't recognize semesters as such. Although I think the critical race theory class, which was about a 14-week course, the way I taught it at Howard, I think we can do it in maybe 8 weeks. And so, you know, more on that, you know, stay tuned for that. But the work at the end of academic semesters around the world is a work that involves, by the time you get to the end of an academic year, convergences and changes, culminations, transitions, and the idea of paying dues. You know, we pay taxes to go to school. That's called tuition. You know, and shout out to the white nationalists. You should try with your tiny bird chests and even smaller hearts. Use all your tiny might to try to block student debt forgiveness, loan forgiveness, because of your masters, the people who have made you a wholly owned subsidiary, the billionaires who don't want to pay any tax, who have no compulsory contribution to the state formation, who certainly won't pay any dues, who have no enforceable obligation or debt. You know, shout out to all you white nationalists and all you others who are wholly owned subsidiaries of these billionaires, who are mad because somebody wants some of our tax money to go to school. And as you undermine your funky little settler cop project, because you don't want them to cancel debt, you don't want to cancel their debt, but you want your masters that pay you to make sure that their obligations are avoided. You know, shout out to y'all. Continue with your little bird chest, because all you're doing is accelerating the day when we don't have to worry about any of this, because you're going to keep on. You're going to keep on till you break it. And I know that makes a lot of people nervous. But again, to use the metaphor that you evoked at the beginning, Prof, I can smell the rain. And smelling the rain there isn't an act of fine-tuning your natural abilities. That's just a simple matter of studying history. This is how it happens, you see. They break it ultimately. They broke it in the 18th century in France. They broke it, quite frankly, in the middle Old Kingdom period in Kemet. This is what Shekinah Job is writing about in Civilization of Barbarism. Breaking a system through structural inequity is not something that Europe has an exclusive monopoly on. Anytime you create an inequitable system, at some point that system seizes up and breaks. So, you know, white nationalists, do it with your bird chest. And Tom Cotton, you keep talking smack about running people, throwing them and pushing them off bridges and stuff. And you're gonna mess around and catch a stray out here in these streets by somebody who did watch you talk. You know, as Black Thought says, you know, first ones to fall is cats with no chin. So, but anyway, back to our regular scheduled conversation. In this walking out of class, you know, Wednesday night, going to the subway, coming back home, that unsettled moment, that moment of transition and that moment of convergence and change that comes at the end of an academic term really washed over me. And I found myself thinking and being very grateful for these spaces, for this space in particular, because we are in a moment and in a space where we pay dues. This is dues paying, slowing down, taking our time to think, taking our time to study and to talk with one another, like what's going on in the chats as we are having this conversation this morning. Now, you know, it's interesting. And I'll just say one of a couple other things about this critical race theory class. I don't think I put my critical race. Oh yeah, I did. You know, I keep some of them things right where I can get them. And this is one. This book just came out by David Theo Goldberg. It's a useful book. I don't know that I would rush and get it. I mean, if you don't, if you must get a book, it's called The War on Critical Race Theory by David Theo Goldberg. I did not assign this book for class, but I thought it was interesting. And what I might do in the critical race theory class for Nubia is maybe share some things from this, maybe take some excerpts out and put them on the narrative platform for people to be able to access, and then probably do maybe a class session on this text. Because what Goldberg does is give a compendium of all the people who are attacking critical race theory and why. Some of the obvious people like this cat, Christopher Rufo, and then some of the less obvious people and the people who fund them. It's very useful. And then, of course, the cosplay white nationalists like DeSantis in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and so many others. The Solid Confederacy is really doing a good job of tearing itself to pieces. Interestingly enough, in South Carolina, you all may have seen there was an article in the New York Times, was it yesterday or today? It might have been today. Let me see. No, it might have been in yesterday's paper. If I can't find it in a second, I'll just give a summary of what they're talking about. No, it's not in it. Anyway, the point is that people are moving. It might have been the FT weekend. People are moving in this from the so-called blue state north to the south. And there was an article in the paper about started with a real estate agent in South Carolina. All these white nationalists who are living in New York, living in Maryland, living in other places like that are trying to move. Many of them with resources are trying to move to the South where they feel like they will be able to practice their racism. That's not the way it's curated in the article, but they're free to be themselves, you see. Oh, I wish I were in the land of cotton. Old times there are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Oh, I wish I were in Dixie. Hooray, hooray. You have a disturbing, at least to me, my spirit, habit. Whenever I'm in a bookstore in the South, a used bookstores in the South, as I've said many times before, as you all know, maybe some new people here, are populated by Civil War books and books on the South, Southern history books. And when I go in those spaces, there's something very tactile about bookstores, used bookstores, the smell of old pages and dust. These bookstores are typically crowded and crammed into former houses, dwellings often, And when they're in larger structures, they're usually like converted warehouses. So you just got row after row of books and papers, and magazines. And I go in there and that smell hits me and I know I'm in the South, and some kind of way, almost always I find myself, and this never happens. This never happens at John King Books in Detroit. It never happens at the Strand in New York. It never happens at the last bookstore in LA. It never happens. It only happens in the South. I'm going through the shelves, that smell hits me, and I'm seeing all these Civil War and Southern history books, and I start. Shit, what just happened? Wish I were. I do not wish. Yeah, I do wish I were in the land. I'm like Du Bois. The future of the race is in the South. And what these white nationalists are doing, humming Dixie as they pack up their stuff and go to South Carolina, go to Georgia and these other places. What they don't realize is you coming down to a place that is ripe to overwhelm you. You can't save yourself. Charles Blow may have just discovered the reverse migration to the South and written about it, and that's very useful and important, but that's part of a larger arc of things. We didn't leave the South because we hated each other. We left the South because the material conditions required us to go in search of better platform and material resources to help ourselves. But I'm saying all that to say that as I was walking to the subway after class Wednesday night, I found myself seized with that moment. There was a tinge of sadness because I'm gonna miss those young people, those 24 that I just named. I'm gonna miss them because their brilliance and genius and their commitment. Man, they were talking the other night about the elders in their families. We're talking about who you pay dues to, who you owe. Who do you owe? Who do we owe and what do we owe? Elders who, for some of them, they're elders and they think about their grandparents and great grandparents, some of the people who I'm going to be very happy to meet at graduation in a couple of weeks when I go to the ceremony that's held for the law students, didn't finish like my parents, didn't finish what we would now call middle school or junior high school for them. Elders who are still alive, who are coming to this graduation as they come to graduations all over the United States and all over the world, but particularly at HBCUs, those elders who come, who will be coming in the next month to sit and watch their grandbaby or great grandbaby or a family friend or this child that they babysat walk across the stage with a JD or an MD or an MBA or bachelor's degree now with a promise of representing their family and community in another space. This is why HBCUs exist. And listening to these young people talk about how they want to use the law as a tool, as a weapon, as a cudgel, as a scalpel, as a shotgun, as a nuclear bomb, as a needle, as an axe to intervene on behalf of Black people. And they understand that this work is why they chose to be at a Black law school, like a Howard or a Texas Southern or a North Carolina Central or a Miles College, a Black law school. Understanding the limitations of the legal universe, which is what critical race theory, I think at its best, really helps us understand. The law is not a solution, the law is a tool. And you certainly shouldn't be seduced into thinking of the law conceptually as some kind of morally anchoring, clarifying entity. It is not. A simple read of Marimba Ani's book, Yurugu, will help us all understand that. But listening to them and then coming out of that space and realizing that they're now at the moment of commencement. They're now all third-year law students. Every one of those 24 I had this semester, third-year law students. And so they'll be graduating shortly. And in that debt and that obligation and that dues paying that they are doing in their formation, they're also investing and they're pursuing an enforceable obligation to the previous generations that themselves endured some horrifying things, and that their parents before them horrifying things, and then past the moment of passage to where we were before we were so rudely interrupted, endured difficult things as human beings, but in formations that we control, that we created, that we curated, that still can speak to the world, and we can tune out the distracting noise of what has happened since and continue to listen to the steady heartbeat of what we have never given up, our ways of knowing, our cultural meaning making, and strengthen our movement and memory, creating that momentum of memory to reinvigorate us, which we spent a great deal of time doing over the last 4 months in that critical race theory class. When we do that, we can then see that our dues that we have been paying, that our obligation is not to the structures that have held us captive and made captives of the people, other people who are in them, but our dues are to our common humanity, and we have something special to say to the world. So walking out of that space, I thought about how this world that we're in, and I love that metaphor, smelling the rain, bro, that when we think about the global affairs of what's going on right now in the world, we saw what happened with Iran and Israel and the United States, these retaliatory bombings, so to speak, and the kabuki display. Are we on the verge of nuclear war? We're always on the verge of nuclear war. This moment right here could be interrupted with the end of the species at any moment. That should scare the hell out of all of us and require those of us who can get in those rooms to get in those rooms and try to avert some of that kind of stuff. But those of us who are not in those rooms, which is the vast majority of us, to move to try to change things, and we have to do that, and that takes organization. But thinking about, what happened again in this space, and then we saw that the United States, I think that was in today's New York Times, the United States is withdrawing its troops from Niger. That's where they have their big base. They call themselves fighting terrorism in West Africa. But it was interesting as well because I saw in the Financial Times, maybe it was here, was it Tony Blair, the Bill Clinton of England? who wrote, let me see if it's in here. It might be in there, maybe in this today's, or it might be in yesterday's paper, where I almost lost a day basically because of something I'm going to talk about in a minute that happened yesterday. No, it's in today's paper. Tony Blair hilariously talking about how let me see if I can find it quickly. If not, I'll just summarize it. Tony Blair is saying that no, I just have to summarize it. Tony Blair, former prime minister in the UK, says that the Western countries need to get over not dealing with the people now in charge in places like Burkina Faso and Mali, because he says we have an obligation to fight terrorism. He said it moves from the Atlantic to the Red Sea. All of those countries are now been overtaken by brutal dictators. We got to help these people. Yeah, no, what you're worried about is the fact that Niger got all that uranium and that Iran is involved and Russia is involved. And you're terrified now because they telling you France got to leave, which you were cool with because you wanted to come in. You've already there. But now they telling you got to leave too. And so on the surface, it's like you're withdrawing your troops. But now you got your lapdog over there, the Blair and them starting to rattle, talking about, oh no, we gotta engage them. Yeah, because you're in a world now where we've always had the threat of nuclear war, at least for the better part of the last century. And now we're in a space where you can't control everybody, but you never could control everybody, could you? So we see Israel bombing Iran, basically saying, we're going to take out your nuclear program. Yeah, okay. And the United States saying, hold, slow your roll, and we're going to be public about it now. Why? Because y'all done lost y'all damn mind. This system is on the verge of seizing up and collapsing because in this global affairs that we're watching, and I won't call them foreign affairs because calling them foreign affairs reinforces this hierarchy of citizenship. Global affairs. We see the elections in India are here, right? Modi's going to win another term. This is today's paper, Narendra Modi. There's people going to vote. It's 1 billion people going to vote in India. And they started, they began last Friday, and they continue in the Sudan, whether it be Nigeria, French West Africa, formerly French West Africa, Haiti, people are rising up and they're rising up against oppression. They're rising up against foreign influence and foreign interference. And the system that has made itself rich, that has engorged itself over the theft of our labor, the system, that very system, is now being assaulted from all sides, including within. This was Wednesday's Financial Times. The United States to grow at double rate of G7 peers this year, says the International Money Fund. The United States economy is on track to grow at double the rate of any G7 country this year, according to IMF forecasts, as the strength of the world's biggest economy rocks international markets. That's why the currencies are really continuing to collapse around the world. The United States getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, this was buried on page 4. China's 5.3 gross domestic project growth beats forecast. They're not part of the G7 as they, but they are. China is like, yeah, we're structuring our economy around our needs, and you can't control us. In fact, you saw Joe Biden last week. He was talking about we got to have some tariffs. We got to put up some protection because China is flooding the market with cheap goods. And China's like, yeah, we producing stuff. Ain't that what y'all said we supposed to do? I'm saying this is a backdrop to what I want to say, which is people are not unaware of inequity generally, but people are fighting back in a lot of different places in a lot of different ways. Some of them from the state level and government level, which we may or may not disagree with. And within those state formations, you got people like in China who are fighting back against their own government because of structural inequities, like in India, where Modi has had an iron grip on power. He's going to get a third term as prime minister after this election, and has used xenophobia in a way to drive his message. They are fighting back. You saw Haiti now will have this provisional government put in place, but that don't mean that the Haitian people are going to like that government. They don't want to be attacked. They don't want to be killed. They want to live their lives, but they want to live their lives creating a space and an entity and a country and a national concept that it enhances life for everyone. And if this provisional government doesn't help that, there's going to be more problems going on. But people are pushing back. And think about that here in the United States with what we saw unfolding and have seen unfolding on college campuses since the fall in relation to the Israel-Palestine war. Even as social structure media tries now to figure out ways not to say Palestine, but Hamas don't do it no more. People have stopped listening to you, not that they were ever listening to you. And so now you're at a space where, well, I didn't want to get into that, but you see these protests in Colombia. This was interesting. This was actually on the cover of the New York Times yesterday. Here are the students at Columbia, right? And then it says, colleges warn of punishment for disruption. Now they putting kids out of school. Y'all saw that Ilhan Omar's daughter was suspended from Barnard. She's a student at Barnard. But these students don't care. These students are pushing back. And so at USC, the young sister, the valedictorian, Ansa Tabassum, she, Muslim sister, she, valedictorian of her class, she posted some things in support of Palestinians and against genocide. And so USC said, you can't speak. But the uproar that has caused, what has happened? They just announced the University of Southern California, the juice is loose. The University of Southern California, Juju, leading the women's basketball team. The University of Southern California canceled all of its commencement speakers for graduation coming up on May the 10th. Rather than let that child speak, because of the pushback, they said, okay, nobody speak. I think Billie Jean King was supposed to get a degree on a filmmaker or something. And nobody gonna speak. See, if you're paying attention, if you're just in tune, look at the news, read other things, be in conversation like we are in these spaces, you can smell the rain. These people are not in the firm grip charge that it may seem. You can demonize Ilhan Omar if you want. You can demonize Isra Hirsi, her daughter. You can suspend her, Barnard, but you ain't going to be able to keep this up because these young people are not backing up. Now, word to my friends, the academics who are on social media tweeting in solidarity and talking about they in solidarity, this kind of thing, who write magnificent books on struggle, who write magnificent books on, and magnificent research monographs and take off sabbatical time to write and go in the archive and research revolution and write about revolution. It's very nice. Well, my question is, are you going to put it on the line with these young people who are now at these Ivy League schools who subsidize all this revolution research and writing and publish these books on revolution and research while you at the same university and these kids out here getting put out of school? What you going to do at Columbia, at Penn? What you going to do at Harvard and Yale? What you going to do at Stanford and University of Southern California? What you going to do at these spaces? Now, that's not, I'm not putting you on blast, but we have to contrast that with what we're doing.
Have you ever taken a sabbatical, Dr. Carr?
No, ma'am. I can't spell it. My daddy went to work every day of his life. So I don't even know what a sabbatical was. Did you ever take one, Professor Hunter?
Not in 25 years. No, not one time.
Sabbatical. We can say it, but I don't know the meaning of that word. By the way, I should mention this. We work people to death. We know that. And the people, institutional memory is important. And actually, I'm going to have this conversation in a couple of weeks with, I think, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Howard University. There's a little noise about trying to displace the Department of African American Studies, where we've been since 1969. And we're going to have a nice, polite, intense, and final conversation about institutional memory. See, because this is what you do when you wreck yourself when you don't have any institutional memory. And I'm going to remind a lot of people of some institutional memory, and we're going to have one conversation and one take only. But sabbaticals are supposed to engender time. You need time to research, to write, to think. And by the way, I think we mentioned this in I mentioned this in office hours on my last Monday night. The biennial, the Venice biennial is coming up, and I think I mentioned it in class as well. And all these Nigerian artists are part of the 13 different African countries who have pavilions at the biennial. We talked about the art complex, and one of the Nigerian artists was saying that the archive is not going to save you. In fact, the colonial archive can entrap you because you think somehow your knowledge is there. I think about my man Kwasi Kanadu, who has done wonders looking in the archives in places like Portugal and Ghana and other places. But he always says, you know, that stuff is ancillary to the real grounding in our governance formations, which is mouth to ear, which is being a community. And there's importance there. But no, sabbaticals, that's a very nice life. And it's a wonderful life to live. And you can write about revolution and all this kind of thing. But when these young people out here on the lawn sleeping under tents and they putting them out of school, I think it would be very difficult to be in that space and not only just say something, but be something. Cornel West, apparently, our brother Cornel West climbed a fence last week to get to the students and talk about that. Of course, he's running for president. And our sister Melina Abdullah is now the vice presidential candidate. And, you know, we got to ask ourselves some hard questions in the governance spaces. How is this going to help free us? How is it going to work? Even as we just got news this week that Robert Kennedy Jr. has qualified for the ballot in Michigan. So all his family is against him and the environmentalists are against him, but he on the ballot in Michigan, and it's too many people in Michigan who will be confused about what's going to happen if and when the white nationalists get back, the open white nationalists, not the soft white nationalists like Joe Biden, but the hard white nationalists like Stephen Miller, and the tool that they're going to use to run their white supremacists. If you ever read the novel, The Plot Against America by Philip Roth, or watch the HBO series based on it, and if they had let Misha Green make that second season of Lovecraft Country, then they could tell you about some rain smelling, what's coming next when the open fascists get in power. And that's not a matter of speculation. That's a matter of studying history. As Gil Scott Heron said, it's looking like Hitler in 38. Did they move to stop Hitler before it was too late? No, damned if I know. But the point is this. Yeah, those academic spaces are signs that the rain is coming. The rain is here. And when you start talking about paying dues, when you start talking about obligated and being obligated in what you owe, what do we owe to these young people? We owe to these young people to pour into them and to receive from them, to be in dialogue with them. As much prep and as much deep study, as much conversation that I led in that critical race theory class, as much of that was as much as they poured into each other and to me with their life experiences, their own study and their own experiences to create a magnificent thing in a Black space that's unpoliced by the idea that you're going to try to explain yourself to somebody else and explain your humanity. I told them first day, this is not what this class is. We are not explaining ourselves to other people. We are debating and discussing and agreeing to agree and then disagreeing on points and then coming to some consensus within this governance formation. That makes it something very different. It's a very different conversation. So, you know, all this is going on. The anti-Muslim hatred, like I said, Tom Land of Cotton talking about using automobiles and using your hands to shove people off bridges and move them out the way if they're blocking traffic. Land of Cotton, you get in your car. Yeah, I wish I was in the land of cotton at that point. You come try to run me over, we're going to dance, brother. And it's going to be very painful for you. Cosplay, Mr. But I ain't got, you know, and that's not a threat. What I'm saying is you don't know history. You don't understand what happens when you try to run over Black people in an intersection. I'm going to say less about that. The theme, though, that emerged as I was leaving there Wednesday, and this carried me through the weekend to today, is the question of dues, taxes, pain, attention, what we owe, who we owe to each other. It made me think about when we were in session 212, when I was in New Orleans, and at the National Association of Black Social Work. That was the session called Destination Liberation. Y'all can go back and look at that one. And thinking about that code of ethics for NABSW and the code of ethics of the National Association of Black Social Workers, all of them, but those first three. Number one, I regard as my primary obligation the welfare of Black individual, Black family, and Black community, and will engage in action for improving social conditions. Number two, I give precedence to this mission over my personal interest. So this idea then that you're doing this for the community and with the community. And finally, number three, I adopt the concept of a Black extended family. NABSW is built on that, on the word, and embrace all Black people as my brothers and sisters, making no distinction between their destiny and my own. Now, People can say, well, what about class? What about geography and position? What about, okay, all those things are very valid, but you start with a commitment to our common humanity, not to the exclusion of other people, and not to the centering of race as a concept that binds us together through time and eternity. Race is a contextual concept. In other words, race is something that was forced upon us that we have used as a weapon to push back against those who would racialize. Race is about whiteness. Race is about whiteness. One more time. Race is about whiteness and the responses to whiteness that come because you've been forced out of a sense of common humanity by a hierarchy that has race as its logic. Commingle with capitalism, commingle whatever you want to commingle it with. But my point is this. When you start talking about liberation and commitment, you can commit to our common humanity through your shared experience, not just the trauma of the shared experience, but the idea that who we are to each other should be at the center of our work in the world. How we develop and recognize and remember our ways of knowing, our cultural meaning making, our movement and memory. And so by Friday, reaching the end of the week, going through those intense final couple of weeks, this week and next week in class, final papers, final assignments, back and forth, my introduction to African States class, my hip hop class, the law school class, critical race theory class, in constant dialogue. And then here come all the high school students and will come sit in on your class. And here come the people. Oh yeah, we see you want to do of course, got time for everybody. Why? Because that's why we are here. These are the dues we pay, which is why HBCU faculty often become quite frustrated when we see colleagues who's like, wow, how many students? Man, I ain't graded a paper in years. My TAs do. Oh, really? That's how y'all get down? By Friday, we had reached a high point. And shout out to all the Nubians who came yesterday. And if you're watching this after Saturday, who came on Friday, the 19th of April, 2024, and attended virtually the dissertation defense of Angela Carter, now Dr. Angela Carter. Her work is spectacular. As I mentioned, I said I was going to talk about, she's breaking new ground. The name of her dissertation was Messages to Meket. Meket, of course, you can translate that as past, present, and future. That's a word from ancient Egyptian language, most prominently featured in the Sebaid of Ptahhotep. It is teaching a person to speak to Meket, to after. After will listen to it, meaning what? Europeans may translate that as posterity, Miriam Lichtheim and others, but Mario Beatty would translate that in a much more complex way. More on that in a moment as I kind of wind this up for today. But Angela, who took meta nature from Dr. Beatty when she was an undergraduate at Howard, Angela, we were on her dissertation committee, her major advisor, Jules Harrell, Mario, myself, Beatty and Carr were on it. Also the great Elizabeth Clark Lewis, great public historian. If y'all don't know Elizabeth Clark Lewis, you should look her up. Just a remarkable sister who has guided so many into the field of Black public history. If you run into a National Park Service park ranger, Black in the United States of America, either they know Libby or they know somebody who she trained. Smithsonian the same way. I mean, that's what she does. Her work is museums and public history. That's what she does. And our external reader was our sister, Catherine Adams. Kat came in virtually from Claflin, was the external reader, and it was a beautiful convening because this young sister, Angela Carter, along with Stephanie Joy Tisdale, another Nubian, worked for many years for Freedom Schools. She's getting her PhD at Temple University. You've heard me talk about that now. And I'm mentioning these universities not because they should be centered. They should absolutely not. We've worked too hard to jailbreak it to go back up in there and try to reinvigorate that. No. I'm mentioning it because what we can see is when we have a foundation, we can inform the work that takes place in those places and also create the space that once that work is complete, those skills can be brought back into this space. Both those two young sisters are going to do that. They were both with us in Kemet last year, which is why so many Nubians showed up at the dissertation defense that people from the graduate school, like, why are these people coming into this Zoom room? Because this is the center coming in to check the periphery. And we just want to watch our sister and what she created. She's a whiz in statistics and all the quantitative sciences, but she combined psychology, which was the area where the dissertation was achieved, with Africana studies and history to create a new concept, a new methodology, a new framework, grounding those conceptual categories in ways where she could explore whether it would even be possible to give a quantitative rendering And it was good to see April there, Professor April Rice, Warren, Nubian there. I mean, so many people, so many Nubians were there. Let me start naming. But Angela developed a test to see if cultural meaning making transcends institutional spaces, transcends direct intergenerational transition, transcends maybe even epigenetic, the possibility of epigenetics. She did an extensive history of Motown and Philadelphia International Records. She's from Philly. Testing then students who came in to read lyrics from both of those companies. And shout out to our sister Diana Williams, out of Philadelphia, New Yorker by way now of Philadelphia, longtime Philadelphian, who one of the co-founders of Black Music Month, who helped out Angela selecting the text that the students should engage. She created a metric, created a design, a research design to test whether or not cultural meaning making can be measured intergenerationally without those institutional influences that are direct. So she combined. It was very interesting. And in the question and answer series, those of you know dissertation defenses, your committee will ask you questions and then ask another round and then open it up for folks. And so Mario asked her a question related to this question of how you recover memory. And Angela gave a definition of Sankofa that was almost hologramic. You know, Holly will put phrases together where you know that the meaning he has conveyed, he didn't think about it in advance. He put the language together almost split second, and it was a perfect definition. She gave a definition of Sankofa yesterday by way of explaining something else that I wrote down. And when we came back around to my next round of questions, I was like, I want to pause here and say that on April 19, 2024, Ms. Carter, you gave, as far as I'm concerned, the most compelling rendering of how to think of Sankofa in the tree, Sankofa, 3 different words. Sankofa, literally go get it. But the meaning is implied because they were in a cultural formation, a governance formation, a way of knowing where you didn't have to say anything else. You knew that meant go back to go forward. Okay, that's a little unseemly. Angela just used 2 words. She called Sankofa remembering forward. Remembering forward. And I'm here sitting on the same computer. I'm like, oh, there it is. The momentum of memory, remembering forward. Remembering forward captures Maquette, past, present, and future. That phrase. If you remember forward, what happened before will remember you. If you remember forward, we will intervene in ways that we have to intervene now. 1968 at Columbia, 1968-69, Jackson State, Howard, all these HBCUs, Tennessee State, A&I. Remembering forward brings the momentum of memory forward. This is the first time students occupied and faculty put their lives on the line, put their jobs on the line. Joanne Robinson in Montgomery running off the Montgomery bus boycott flyers. She and the sisters in the English department behind the back of Council Trenum as the president of Alabama State, as we talked about before there in Montgomery. The momentum of memory allows us to recover that. Sankofa, remembering forward, allows us to do that. So how do we pay dues to the past? What, in fact, are our obligations, our enforceable obligations? What is our debt? The debt is to remember forward. And not to remember forward beginning with the trauma, to remember forward beginning with the beginning, which is where I want to end today. Our genealogies are direct responsibilities. You know, Bob Omatosho, Dr. Black on Monday night in office hours with 2,000 plus people there, previewing language from the next iteration of the coming, the plantation years of the coming, evokes this sense of what we owe to the momentum of memory and those not only who suffered, but to their ancestors, because their ancestors and ancestors. Sitting last Saturday at Dory Ladner's memorial. And for those of you who were not in office hours, I'll show you the program. I showed everybody in office hours the program for Dory Ladner. And all those veterans of the human rights struggles of the 1950s and 60s and 70s and forward, they're convened to celebrate their sister, their comrade. You understand that what we owe them is to remember forward, to ground ourselves in that work, and that the debt we owe is to the future and the present and the past at the same time. And thinking about that in terms of what you mentioned, Prof, this question of voting. This was in the paper yesterday. Black voters generation gap poses problem for Biden camp. This is social structure tripe written I won't call it tripe, actually, it's social structure. Important work is being observed because, oh man, my young sister Maya King. Maya was my student at Howard. She done made it to the front page of the New York Times. Black voters generation gap poses problem for Biden camp by Maya King.
Are you just noticing that?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. I'm bringing it up though in the context because what Maya is doing, coming out of Black institutional formations, and Maya is kind of quiet. You know what I'm saying? She was the one, she come to class, education in Black America, Black aesthetics. She had these glasses, she'd be sitting in the front. She looked the whole time. And then maybe after a month or two, she might say something. She might, every paper she turned in, she was listening the whole time. She was reading the whole, you know how those students are. Some of them, and then, over the years, she got a little bit more vocal. And I watched Maya's career. Now she's on the front page of New York Times. She not there representing the New York Times. She there representing us at the New York Times. It's a different thing. And so I think she actually might be living in Atlanta now. And it starts with, for years, Loretta Green has voted at her Southwest Atlanta precinct wearing the same custom t-shirt emblazoned with a photo of her first voter registration card dated to 1960. The front of it reads, "This is why I vote." She's 88. Since gaining the legal right, let's just pause there. Since gaining the legal right, there was a time when she couldn't vote, you see. Says, has participated in every possible election. This November will be no different. She said when she cast a ballot for President Biden and the Democrats down the ticket. But conversations with her younger relatives who have told her they're unsure of voting or considering staying home illustrate some of the challenges Mr. Biden's campaign faces in reassembling its winning 2020 coalition, particularly in key battleground states like Georgia. While Ms. Green and many other older Black voters are set on voting and already have plans in place to do so, younger Black voters, polling and focus group data show, feel far less motivated to cast a ballot for Democrats or even at all. Shout out to Leonard McKelvey and Stephen A. Smith running around in traffic with no momentum of memory, handpicked as pick-me's. Young people, y'all know what a pick-me is. Who, pick me, right? And have been picked, and who no one should be listening to seriously about things that require deep study and the momentum of memory. They are not remembering forward. And that's not a criticism of them. It's a recognition and an observation that the system that we're in curates these kind of voices to try to distract us. This, of course, is the sister that Maya is writing about with her shirt. This is why I vote. And then she interviews these other people that are maybe not clear. This brother here, this sister, Tari Turner, a Detroit Democrat, and her son, Bryce Ballard. I make him vote, she said, but he said he wouldn't vote this fall. This is an act of defiance. I'm not sure. But the point is this. When we think about this question of voting, I'm sitting there with all these folk remembering their sister, Dory Ladner, her sister, her daughter, Yoit, and everybody there. Dave Dennis, of course, the great SNCC veteran, Cortland Cox, so many other, my man Chuck Neplett from the SNCC Singers who led the singing at the convening. And of course, always shout out to Shiloh Baptist Church right down the street from Carr G. Woodson's house. My man Kevin Peterman, another of my former students, associate minister there. He was the master of ceremony. And I'm sitting there next to the great Eleanor Traylor, the master teacher. Next to her is one of her roll buddies that she rolls with. And that, of course, would be Cora Masters Berry, the partner of Marion Berry, former mayor for life of DC. And then sitting there with them and artist Hampshire Cowan, who used to be the secretary of the board of trustees at Howard University. Also, a daughter of Mobile who would always have all the Alabama students at Howard over her house. And I would come over there. We would come over there and have a good time. Myself and Dana Williams at the time, we would be over there with them. And her son Ernest went to Kemet with us, in fact. But sitting here with these elders, listening to these elders talk about their comrade, and then reading something like this, and I think to myself, if we and when we continue to bring generations in conversation with each other, to have these debates, to have these discussions, so that the young person in Detroit says, I ain't gonna vote. Okay. Come sit with these elders who had that same conversation when they were your age and younger in Atlantic City in 1964, when they broke the Democratic Party open and then said, we ain't coming in here for no representative seats. Ms. Hamer and Ella Baker and them say, and Annie Devine, and you need a Blackwell and them coming out of Mississippi say, we ain't coming in here for us to have some representative tokens, Dr. King. I'm so sorry, sir. You can give a great speech, but this is something else. We're going to bust this thing wide open. We're going to start our own party, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and we're going to have our own candidates. We're going to do all that. But that did not mean as a tactic that it displaced the fact that we are also going to fight and vote in this. In other words, it's not a one-trick pony, but young people can understand that. Anyone who doesn't understand it yet can, if they are put in a space where we can have this convened conversation and understand my heart of different ages. The 88-year-old was 18 at one time. Dory Ladner and Joyce Ladner were once teenagers in this struggle, had dinner the night before with Medgar Evers the night he was killed, all sitting there. In other words, what I'm saying is that when we are in intergenerational conversation, those are the dues we pay. Those are the obligations, the enforceable obligations that are very important to understand. And so that's what we owe what would be called in the English language a tradition, but it's not tradition, it's maquette. It's past, present, and future. It's remembering forward, as Angela Carter would say. So last night, after this intense series, this child been working on his dissertation for years. She worked on it the whole time she was a graduate student, including being a teaching assistant. She was our lead teaching assistant, and hearing that from Jasmine Watkins, Dr. Watkins' niece, who took it from Wallace Baxter early on, Reverend Dr. Wallace Baxter now, as the lead TA in our freshman seminar class, the class we no longer teach because there's no momentum of memory at the Negro College. And that's fine because I got more important work to do right now. And I wouldn't go back to that. That was 1,500 students in the fall. And it was a beautiful thing to do. And we did it for 15 wonderful years. Shout out to the great James Donaldson, whose idea it was. But then there came a generation who did not understand, and not to overburden the Christian metaphor, because as far as I'm concerned, the use of Egypt in the Old Testament is criminal. But to use the metaphor, to understand, there came a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph, and that's just fine, because that's what you understand. You undermine institutions without institutional memory. Of course, the other metaphor that comes to mind, that came to mind, Prof, when you talked about the fact that there are some people who simply want to go back into enslavement, was the other metaphor made, of course, immortalized by James Weldon Johnson in God's Trombones, when they got out of oppression and got out in the desert. They looked at Moses and said, hey, man, ain't nothing to eat. This is before the manna, right? Were there no graves in Egypt? If we were going to die, could we just stay back there? I mean, so that moment of fear, you got to make a decision. But if you can't see it, you got to be surrounded by people who can see it, who can lead you to that space, what they call grand maroonage. Yes, there is a place, Nubia. There is a place where you can go, and that can enforce you and fortify you. So when you go in those other spaces, you know that you ain't got to stay there. It's a different kind of conversation. So Friday, after everything was done, this young woman has done her work. We're all surrounding her. Everybody's there. She finished. Okay, now mom and them crying. Everybody's beautiful, her sister and them, and they'll all be here in a couple of weeks, and we'll all get a chance to see all the family. It's a beautiful thing out of Philly and Seattle, all the places they come from, North Carolina. And I said, I need to breathe. So last night at the Kennedy Center, Rakim Allah, the God MC, was in town with Philadelphia's DJ Jazzy Jeff and Ravi Coltrane. Ravi Coltrane, the son of Alice and John Coltrane. They got this project where they're doing this thing to remind people and introduce to other people the relationship of so-called jazz to so-called hip-hop. I wish I could have taken all my young people there, because who taken a hip-hop class with me this semester, because if I had, they would have been the youngest people there. Professor Hunter, when I tell you that the packed out room, they had the big hall, you know, where they do the Kennedy Center honors or whatever. The packed room, if there were 30 people there under 45 years old, I'd be surprised. It was everybody there was in their 50s, including Rakim, who's on stage. You know, Rakim got this thing where he does this thing. He don't move too far. William Rakim Griffin has mastered the art of appearing to move a lot without moving it, and that breath control. And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is what oldies hip hop looks like. We've gotten to that age. So, you know what I'm saying? So different when Jagger and them going up and down the stage and then they trying to, you know, keep their own skinny jeans and t-shirts and stuff on. It's different when the latest iteration of the main ingredient or the stylistics or the Temptations are performing in Atlantic City and you get on the casino bus and go out there, man. Now hip hop has reached that stage. And every time Jazzy Jeff would cue up another song, Rakim would look back and say, hey man, I wrote a lot of songs. So you got to tell me which one you going to put on. So I tell you whether or not I remember the words. I mean, it's just, it was hilarious. And but the point, I'm raising it for this reason. He didn't have to worry about, I think he was kind of kidding, but he didn't have to worry about remembering all the words to his treasure trove of hits. Because every time he started one, we all know what happened. All of us, word for word. Some people ain't repeated them words in decades. I remember, and you remember too, Prof, don't you, when Eric B. and Rakim came out, Eric B. as president with James Brown, that momentum of memory and that music. 1986, 1986, 1987. No tricks in 86. You know what I'm saying? Remember, you know, so when anytime he would start a lyric, it didn't matter what he started, everybody would finish it. Because to me, MC means move the crowd. Everybody knows, you know. I mean, you know, the whole idea that you could be in a concert with a bunch of 50, 60-year-olds and 40-year-olds, and if it's a 20-year-old, they came with their mama or their daddy, and they looking around having fun. But these Negroes dancing, doing their stuff all over, and it's like, you know, thought I was a donut. You tried to glaze me. all these conversations, and then listening and looking on the ends of the stage, and on each end of the stage. So Robbie Coltrane's here with his horn blowing. I mean, it was amazing to hear Robbie Coltrane's saxophone improvisations floating over Juice, Know the Ledge, I Know You Got Soul, I Ain't No Joke, all them songs, Mahogany, which of course was the remix of Al Green's tune, and then baby, why did you wait so long? Thankful for your love. But of course, me and Eric B was playing at the Palladium, seen an all-world cover girl, and said, "Hey, lady, I'm sorry." In other words, this whole, but then Robbie Coltrane comes in, floating over it with the horn. So they're on one side. He got a trio. He's got a bass player, keyboard player on the other side, brother on the drums on the other side. Jazzy Jeff's DJ's work is set up on the right, on stage right. Rakim is going right there, back and forth in the middle, and on either side of the stage, in the wings, just on stage to the door, the entrance and exit, are two brothers in bow ties with their hands like this. Nation of Islam. See, who we are to each other is very different, because Rakim is a Muslim and came out of the nations of gods and earths, the 5%ers. But the Nation of Islam brothers are there, whether they were members of the nation or dressed to convey a sense of the members of the nation. What you conveying in full view is who we are to each other. If y'all want to overhear, fine. That's what Angela was saying. We asked her yesterday when Mario asked her, she said, you know, no, Motown didn't cross over. Motown created an Africana foundation and people responded to it. That's what you see in hip hop. And it was fascinating because sitting there looking at that, it was a reminder. And by the way, the John Coltrane house in New York, about 35 miles, I think, north of Manhattan, is in Long Island, actually 35 miles away from Manhattan in Long Island, has been put on the National Historical Preservation Trust. They want to restore it. That's, of course, where A Love Supreme was composed by John Coltrane upstairs in one of the bedrooms. He's locked himself away and came up with that. Alice Coltrane, a number of her albums were recorded there before they left the house in 1973. John Coltrane, of course, made transition in 1967. You all can look it up. I'm sure somebody's probably already put it in the chat. In terms of supporting the Coltrane house is very important. But that experience Friday night reminded me, these are Black people, most of them don't know each other. We're all in there. We're all convened around this moment of cultural meaning making that also evokes movement and memory, as Rakim is narrating where he was and how he composed this, and Jazzy Jeff is taking apart the contemporary hip hop moments and taking out the elements from jazz that preceded and playing those records and then bringing them back into hip hop. And as Robbie Coltrane, the link itself from his parents and their previous generations is bringing that momentum of memory forward with three brothers, young brothers on these instruments who are then taking it out of the recording sound to use to kind of integrate and produce hip hop and putting it back in the live instruments. It was all an empowering lesson in how the momentum of memory, how remembering forward can ground us. Every generation has to make its own cultural meaning making, but the momentum of memory allows us to tie those things together. And if we do it strong enough and correctly enough, we will engage in Sankofa, in remembering forward. And that ultimately will be the thing that saves us. So today, in a moment, and when we finish up, thinking about how these young people in this critical race theory class this semester ripped up the floorboards in my mind. I told them after every class, normally the class starts at 6:10, it ends at 8:40. If you take a 20-minute break in between, so I always ask them, I say, okay, we can keep going, and people need to use the restroom, whatever, y'all can get up and use and come back. Y'all want to not take a break and end 20 minutes early? And they would say, yeah, we want to do that. Okay, fine. So we supposed to end at 8:20. Sometimes we be in there till they come upstairs and say, okay, y'all got to leave the building. It's 9 o'clock or it's 10 o'clock at the extended hours, you got to leave. We in there. I mean, every week. And this is what I'm looking forward to in Nubia. They ripped up the floorboards of what I was thinking about and just put another one down. And then when one of them said that their grandmother was coming, who didn't finish the 6th grade, coming to graduation, and that she's in school because her grandmother never wanted to quit school, but she had to go to work. You know, people got that story. We all got that story in our family. My mother and father, same thing. 7th grade, 8th grade. Had to go to work. Had to get drafted into the damn army ultimately, as my father did in World War II. But the point is this, she says, when I come across that stage, my grandmother, and then they all start clapping. I'm like, you can't displace the momentum of memory. Remembering forward means grounding yourselves in that momentum. And so in a moment, when, we pause for now and then resume in office hours on Monday night, be going to the ASCAT conference. The ASCAT conference is this week. It started last night, virtually. If I can hurry up and pull up one of the, if I can get my computer on here, I'll tell you. Yes, this is where I want to end. The theme this year is the power of study, deep thought, and good speech. Isn't too late to register. Y'all can still register. April the 19th, which started Friday night, through the 27th. Next week, I speak. I think, let me see if I can find the topic that I'm talking about on next Saturday afternoon. On right before Bernie Goldman, Dr. Goldman out of South Carolina, who's talking about white psychopathic narcissistic pseudo supremacy, which is hilarious. And then Rosalind Jeffries, the great art historian, one half of the dynamic duo. Leonard Jeffries is speaking after her. She's speaking on artificial intelligence and comedic truth, cultural appropriations. My talk is entitled "History is About the Future." That is a nod to my man, the great Anderson Thompson, this brother right here, who opened the conference last night with a video. Dr. Thompson, who published in the Compass, and by the way, we still have these, his essay, "The Decade of Truth, African Intellectual Warfare Against Nomadic Historiography." I'm going to be speaking from that with the title, "History is About the Future, Good Speech, Civil Wars, and African Deep Thought." But that's next Saturday. In between, there are so many people presenting their presentations, and you are going to ask at ascac.org. You can register. You'll see we got presentations today, tomorrow, then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings, Friday evening, and then next Saturday we'll finish. We spread it out over the arc of a little bit over a week. Today, at noon Eastern time, we open with libation, and I'm going to do that libation virtually. I'll be the one. Last night, Mama Latrella Thornton, former president of the Eastern Region of ASCAC, did libation. Then Makeda Kumasi, who went to Kim with us. Those of you remember Makeda. Makeda is going to do a piece with the LA City College Dance Ensemble, a recorded piece. And then we're going to talk with Yopareka Somé, who is at Dedan Kimathi University of Technology in Kenya. One of the students came out of Sheikh Anta Diop in Senegal. He's going to talk about 100 years of Sheikh Anta Diop. And then we'll talk with the ASCAC Building Fund, Reba Kelsey, that whole crowd, Ife Carruthers, so many others, Yvonne Jones, the members of that committee, because we're securing a space. We need a space, a physical space for the association. And then Mario's going to speak at 1:30 Eastern time. And he's going to be looking at the WASP scepter and power. So those of you who are taking the meta class here, you all know that work. I'm just going through today. Mama Latrella will be chairing an ASCAC Education Commission conversation. Sharon Johnson, who's probably here now, Nubian, she'll be on that panel talking about good speech and inwardly securing our own self-knowledge. Very important. Then Malik Deme, who's at Sheikh Anta Diop University, will be speaking. Was the Egypt of the Pharaohs one of the cradles of iron metallurgy? And then we'll have a break. Some people from Ghana coming in, Nana Shabazz, and the Sapahani of Baturi village in Elmina, Ghana. It'll be live from Ghana. And then finally, I want to mention this, two others, Linda James Myers, Professor Myers, the great African-centered psychologist, will be speaking this afternoon at 5:45 p.m. on the topic of freeing us now, Eastern time, and building for eternity in the Al-Kabbalah tradition of study, deep thought, and good speech. But at 5:15 p.m., our own brother Larry Crow is going to be talking about his interview with Michael Gomez, who wrote this book, African Dominion, A New History of Empire in Early and Medieval West Africa. It's a very important text. Larry interviewed him for the History Makers about a month ago, and Larry's going to be talking about Africana scholarship on the West African empires. J.C. DeGraff Johnson, Chancellor Williams, John Jackson, John Henry Clark, and others, and reflections of my History Makers interview with Michael Gomez. I know he was trying to get Professor Gomez to come in and maybe be in dialogue with him if he had a moment, so he might actually be able to do that. And so the whole purpose of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations, founded in 1985, although it had its first conference in 1984 in Los Angeles, founded in Chicago in 1985, is to promote the study of African people and African worldview. This is actually one of the early programs. I didn't go in my stash. This is the fourth actual conference. I put this on because it took place July 8th through the 10th, 1987, in the middle of a study tour, a 2-week study tour of Egypt in Aswan, Kemet. This is the fourth annual conference. 1,000 Black people came from around the world, mostly from the United States, to go to Kemet. That's the opening page there. Yemotep, welcome, come in peace. There were two young brothers on that trip who were taken by their uncle and auntie. Their names escape me. Oh, no. Yes, I remember. Hassan and Hakeem Jeffries on that trip. Their uncle and auntie took them there. So many others I could show you all. Y'all see our logo, the woman and man there, the Quayle logo. That's what I have on my hoodie. But we are dealing with this question of the future. But the future is the past and the present. And we have to recover the momentum of memory by remembering forward, as Miss Carter would say. Now, Dr. Carter, by the way. But the point is that remembering forward involves fortifying ourselves by paying dues. And by paying dues, I mean by enforcing our obligation to each other and by repurposing our attention, repurposing the way that we move through the world. And if we do that, we're going to be more than fine, I think. We're going to be more than fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of folk commenting on your hoodie. I don't think it's available anywhere, right?
Well,
People
actually,
get that.
At every,
I went on the website. I went on.
No.
Yeah.
We don't have the merch. This is from 2017. Oh wow, yeah, March 23rd to 26th, 2017. This is when we were at Dillard. When Walter Kimbrough was still president. We tried to go to Black colleges when we can. In fact, I pulled one point. This is one of my favorite ASCACs. This was 1997. This is when we were at Tuskegee. I always look. We should go back to Tuskegee soon. But no, every physical conference, we're going back next year. We'll be at Morehouse in March 2025 in person, and we'll have the hoodies. But in between now and then, we've been talking about putting the stuff, the merch, so to speak, on the website, because we always had these in person. And so I always, that's what I do. I rep these. But yeah, we'll come up with a platform. Maybe we can do a collab. We should do a collaboration with Nubia.
Yes,
we could do that. We should absolutely do that. I mean, in fact, we should just say, in fact, that's why this platform is here. Yes, you know what? That's what we do. The other thing is, I should mention just very quickly, I was looking at, let me see. Yeah, in preparation while I'm writing this presentation, and I usually don't write them, but I'm writing here because I want to use it as an opportunity to think through some ideas. And as you have, commanded, basically those of us who should be writing more, we need to do that. We do have a suite of publications, and we work with Sankofa, but we need to now figure out how to get that synergy with Sankofa and here to do this work. This, of course, as I mentioned, the Compass. This is our journal. And got stuff from Anderson Thompson, Jacob Carruthers. You got stuff from Marimba Ani and Francis Cress Welsing. Valithia's got an article in here. This particular issue, Beyond Feminism: Some Theoretical Guideposts Toward Examining Women in African Contexts. That article is in here. There are 3 volumes of that. And we also did the African World History Project. This is probably the most important thing that we produced as an association. This is from 1997. That's the African World History Project, the preliminary challenge, published, edited by Jacob Carruthers and Leon Harris. Just to give you all a sense of this table of contents is divided into 4 sections: the challenge, the African historical imagination, patterns of African-centered history, and part 4 is African-centered perspectives. Now, if you look at this, you'll see part 1, that's Anderson Thompson and Theophilo Obenga. Thompson's piece alone is incredible. Dr. Obenga, of course, still walks the earth. He's in Congo now. Part 2, that's Jacob Carruthers, William Bogo, and Riketi Wimby Jones on the Calendar Project, Rethinking Time in Kemet. Part 3, Patterns of African-Centered History, that's Asa Hilliard, Leonard Jeffries. And then part 4, John Henry Clark, by the way, and Jacob Carruthers and Leon Harris wrote the introduction. Part 4 is us when we was young. This is like 97, 07, 17. That's 27 years ago. My God. I decided Jamu, then Mario on my aunt, Valethia. This is where we got our PhDs, Womanism, Black Feminism. And then the core of what became my dissertation, I wrote a chapter called The African-Centered Philosophy of History, an exploratory essay on the genealogy of foundationalist historical thought and African nationalist identity construction. And then me and Valethia did the transcript of the initial meeting and Jacob Carruthers' memo that called us together. I'm raising that because this book gives the lie to books like this. There's a really popular kind of chuckle, these people are crazy crowd that thinks, in fact, young people now and others who have been miseducated refer to people who write in things like this, who have organizations like this, as hoteps. Mouth open, very small brain on display. And you see, I got to help you with that brain. Let's water you and help you grow, because these are people who actually do the study. Don't confuse them with the people who use YouTube and as a platform to kind of spout and speak. And remember that all the people who love Wakanda so much, who never heard of Black Empire, all those people have work to do to understand even the speculative fiction. And in Nubia, when we read the Parable series of Octavia Butler, this sister studying, and then basically creating something that people look like, think is magic, that she was a prophetess. No, she studied. She could smell the rain and wrote about the rain. Now that it's raining, go back and read the parables and understand that word is often, when you've struck a nerve, when people like Stephen Howe, this Englishman who was at Oxford many years ago, the year we graduated, actually, 1998, wrote this book called Afrocentrism, Mythical Past and Imagined Homes. You don't need to waste no money on this book. Don't waste any money on this book. But the fact that these white nationalists would put Lois Mailou Jones, a painting that she did, The Ascent of Ethiopia from 1932, on the cover of a book trashing African-centered work. And there are a lot of books like that. In fact, I would say if you're going to waste money on a book, waste it on this one. This is a book that came out of a guy who was at Tel Aviv, actually, the University of Tel Aviv, called History in Black African Americans in Search of an Ancient Past. Yaakov Shavit, Frank Cass, publishers out of London, did this. If you're going to waste money, it's a waste of money too. But if you're going to read about what people who many people call hoteps, because they don't know that I could take a Sharpie and write hotep on your forehead and tell you, if you can't translate that in 30 seconds, that you're going to get your head blown off, it'd be a lot of people with no head. in the world, because you call somebody something and you don't even know what the language is or what the glyphs are or even what it means. Hotep literally means peace. So the idea, it's like, well, I'm not gonna get into that. That's a whole. I don't want to set nothing off. We can talk about that in office hours. And one day in office hours, we're gonna have a whole conversation about massage noir. But anyway, I'm gonna leave it just like that. The debates we have to be grounded in our conversations. People who are reading stuff like that, who are saying that these people are unserious, they're not putting that in, the stuff we write, in conversation with Howard French, Born in Blackness, or Michael Gomez, African Dominion. They're not putting the challenge that Chancellor Williams brings up. This is the first edition, first printing of the redone The Destruction of Black Civilization, Great Issues of a Race. People say, oh, that's that Hotep stuff. Really? Read it and critique it. And don't gloss over it. Let's go line for line, paragraph for paragraph. It becomes a different kind of conversation that we will have. So we'll be there this afternoon at ASCAC and all week. And Monday night in office hours, we're going to continue the conversation that we've been having around how I'm reframing this Introduction to Afro-American Studies course. Thanks everybody on Monday. Last Monday, as I talked about extending the framing questions, because that framing question 2 is really too big. It's got to be broken down in terms of time. If you know what we're talking about, that's what we're doing over in Nubia on Monday as we prepare to do this this intro class again.
I love it. I love it. That book thing that you did at the end.
Oh,
let me just say, anybody that's have had the blessing to be in a classroom with you, you know, we both have students, but what you do, those of you who are educators, I marvel at it. I know that you were put on this earth to do exactly what you're doing, because you do it so masterfully. So I
learned. Thank you. I learned from John Clark and Anson Thompson and them. But you're right. We do. And look, your classroom 5 days a week. People. Anyway, we talked about this before, but I feel obligated since you brought it up. The classroom of radio, as you've said to us many times, really will never be displaced. And that, in some ways, you talk about like how we can find some hope. The hope that lies in listening to the dialogue that you engendered, the jokes you crack, the things you say and don't say, the rhythms of that is very much jazz. You know, you can have 1 million breakfast clubs, or you can have 1 million, but it can't displace that, because what you do is force people to think, and in forcing people to think, that's the work we do as teachers. We'll find our way.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Teachers and students alike. I love you. Everyone in. We'll see each other next week. So
indeed.
Happy birthday then. All right. See everyone. All right. Bye-bye. All right. Remove.